Wonderful, wonderful to have everyone back, and I hope you had a great time checking in. We had a great time setting up the Zendo here, and we're happy you could all join us this morning for Sunday Morning Zen, a program of the Zen Life Meditation Center here in wonderful Oak Park. Again, programs like this are made possible by your generosity, and we sincerely appreciate it. So we'd appreciate it if while you're thinking about it, if these programs like Sunday Morning Zen and Commit to Sit mean as much to you as they do to the rest of the folks, just please take a moment and head on over to zlmc.org/donate. June may have put a little note in the chat box and help us to keep this going. We really appreciate your generosity. So this morning, I have a man who doesn't need much of an introduction. He's our abbot. He's the co-founder of Zen Life Meditation Center, and he is the author of our core curriculum and a 50-year practitioner of meditation and mindfulness practice. And he's going to speak to us today about something that's close to his heart and really makes the ZLMC kind of special and unique, makes it go, and that's the shared stewardship model. So thanks very much, Roshi.
Thank you, Shikhan. Can you all hear me online? Okay. So this morning I would like to talk about shared stewardship, and I'm using the word Teoshpae from the Lakota or Native American tradition to talk about this as well. So the first thing I want to say is this place where we are used to be occupied by the Potawatomi and the Sauk and the Fox Indians. And every time I look into this, I feel curious about what happened, how we got here, and how they left. And apparently, they were all those three tribes are, I believe, related to the Ojibwe, who are in Wisconsin now. And they basically ceded their lands to the settlers here. I believe it was in the late 1830s. And they still exist. They're a loose affiliation of tribes. The Potawatomi have a small reservation in Wisconsin, and I believe their headquarters are in Oklahoma. So that's about as much as I know about them. And the Sauk are related to Algonquin-speaking tribe, closely related to the Fox and the Kickapoo, and they are currently, from what I understand, living in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So I'm just going to start with a question. What does the word shared stewardship bring to mind when you hear it? What does that mean to you? It could mean different things, but what comes up for you when you hear the word shared stewardship? Anybody? Online or in person? Community? Okay. We need a microphone to go around for the people in the room. Anyone online too? You're just welcome to speak up.
Doing something good.
Doing something good, Julie says, okay. Anyone else?
Shared responsibility.
Shared responsibility, I like that. Yes. Well, if we're sharing something, then we're all sharing some responsibility to do what that is that we're sharing. What stewardship evoke to you, the word stewardship?
Guidance.
Guidance, okay. What else?
Taking care of something?
Yes, taking care of something. You steward the land. If you have a trust, you're stewarding some mission or legacy of something, of some values that you want to see carried forward in the world.
Caring for.
Caring for, did you say? Yes, caring for. Sort of a thoughtful, caring, taking care of something. we use the word for stewards, stewardesses on airplanes. In a way, they're stewarding all the passengers, right? They're responsible for our coffee and our drinks and our not so good meals, but they're stewarding us on the plane, right? In a way, we could say they're our hostess. And you know, the hostess and the guest is a very old metaphor in the Rinzai tradition, which represents these two aspects of our human experience of vastness and form, how they come together, the guest and the host. That's a very sweet relationship, and in the Japanese culture, they've actually codified that or ritualized that into the tea ceremony. And if you've ever done the tea ceremony, you know what an intimate and beautiful ritual that is about how the host serves the guest with thoughtfulness and care and attention, loving attention, really. So I think this word shared stewardship evokes for me a sense of a loving, co-creating and taking care of something together. And it is a word that we have used now here at the Zen Center for many years. It was originally modeled at our mother temple at the Zen Center Los Angeles by a Gyoku Roshi and her students, and they still are practicing shared stewardship at the Zen Center Los Angeles. So we took this up as a way of organizing and governing ourselves many years ago. And I'm going to talk briefly about the mechanics of this, but then I want to talk about the spiritual vision that I think underlies all of this and why that is important for all of us. So just to touch on that to begin with, the reason I'm associating this with this word Tioshpaye, Sensei and I and Julie recently went to a bearing witness retreat in the Black Hills. It was, for me, it was very powerful and moving and heartbreaking. And I learned a lot from the Lakota elders. And one of the things I learned from them was this notion of Tioshpaye, which I think it literally means putting your teepees together. But the sense of it is that you have an extended family of kinship. And in the Native American tradition, kinship it's complex and it's important. They think of themselves as kin, not necessarily as individuals. And so they would have extended families beyond what they're simply their blood relationships. You have your family, which is through your bloodline, but then you have cousins and uncles and extended family beyond that. In the sense of the Lakota, they think of, in the broadest sense, this is a very inclusive kind of kinship that includes anyone that's in the Lakota Nation. And so, and the one thing that's kind of interesting is that when I don't know if they still do this, I believe they probably do. They do this in Hawaii. They often, in the traditional culture, they didn't call people by their names. They called them by their like uncle or nephew or sister or brother or father. So you could have more than one father. And you wouldn't call them by their name, but you would say father or uncle. And in Hawaii, they do this a lot too. You know, you don't belong to someone's family, but if they know you, they'll call you brother or uncle or sister, aunt. It's a very sweet thing to have an extended family. And so I think this notion of kinship is something I want to talk about more today in relationship to what we mean by Sangha. Because, as you know, we've all been through the ringer with the pandemic. And in a way, we're still coming through it or coming out of it. I don't know where we are anymore. Are we in it, out of it, behind it, in front of it? But I do believe it has had a profound effect on our community, and I do believe we need to pay attention to what our real wealth is as practitioners of this tradition, which is our community, our Sangha. And so I would say all of us are a kind of tioshpaye. We are all kin, and you don't have to have, we have our families, and then we have extended families, and then we have sanghas. And in our case, our sangha is actually not just this sangha that you see here, but we have a lineage. We have a spiritual lineage, the White Plum lineage, which is also our tioshpaye. And there are probably now over 100 teachers in our lineage, in America, in Europe, all over the world. And they have sanghas. So that's also, they are all, in a way, our kin, where we could think of them that way. And so this morning we chanted the long version of the lineage, because I'm wanting to raise some awareness that we have collective resources, and they're not just abstract, they're actually people. And we have relationships that we can grow and strengthen so that when we face the kind of difficulties and challenges that we are facing in these times, we have resources to draw on, extended families that can support us. So I'm going to say something brief about the mechanics of a shared stewardship, but I don't think it's all that interesting, but it's important in terms of how we function. So when we started to try this out many years ago, the idea was the kind of the heart of shared stewardship is the practice of council circle. Now, we haven't done a lot of council circles since the beginning of the pandemic either. And I really hope that as we move forward, we will find the time to be together. We will take the time. We're always in a rush. Seems like we never have enough time. But to me, this notion of kinship and tioshpaye means we take the time to listen to each other and be together. That's the practice of counsel. That is the heart of what we mean by shared stewardship. And the idea was that could we govern our Zen Center in a way that somewhat matched the way we practice? So the idea was that we would, whenever we would have business meetings or group meetings or support groups, we would start with some kind of council process, like a check-in, where we connect to each other before we go into the business. Before we hear the financial report, we start by, where are you at? What's alive for you right now? And we hear what's alive for everyone so that we connect. And then after that, we do the business of whatever we're here to do. But that way of governing ourselves means that we're always connecting when we govern. When we run the Zen Center, we take the time to care for each other by just listening. Someone's father is sick, or someone's mother just died. It's important to hear that, to know that about each other. One thing we were trying out, I don't think anyone's doing it anymore, but so the idea was in shared stewardship, we would have different kinds of circles. We had 3 different kinds. We have leadership circles, which are responsible for actually the operation of our Zen Center. The board of directors is a primary example of a leadership circle. They're responsible for the financial health of the Zen Center. But we also have a gem circle, which is also a leadership circle, which is responsible for fundraising to support the Zen Center. And then we have another kind of circles, which we call support circles, which don't necessarily have anything to do with the functioning of the Zen Center, but they have to do with something that is needed in our community at the moment, where you need support. in some area. And so the idea is that support circles could come and go as the need arises. If there's a need for women to get together, then if a steward, every circle has to have a steward that stewards it, that is responsible for scheduling it and letting people know when the meeting is. And then, so if there's a need for women to be together, then a women's circle arises. And that lasts as long as that need exists in the community, and it could go away when the need disappears. We've had a circle on death and dying several times now. So there's a people of color circle. And then, so we have a study circle, different kinds of support circles. There's a circle on the environment. We're still not sure if it's a support circle or a social action circle. I'm waiting to hear which it is. But so we have this third kind of circle, which is a social action circle, which is kind of in its own category, which is a circle that's trying to engage with the outer world more actively. So I'm not going to say too much more about the mechanics of this, but one thing I will say is we had a suggested format in the beginning, which I think has gone by the wayside. But the idea was anytime you have a circle meeting, you start with a check-in, which is council. And then the second thing you ask a guiding question. You spend 5 or 10 minutes finding what is a question that's going to guide the work of your particular circle. Now, this is not so easy to do, which is why I think no one's doing it anymore. You actually have to ask a question that you don't answer. And we usually want to answer, once there's a question, we think there has to be an answer to it. But there's nothing like a good question. So it's almost like visioning. So the idea was that the circle would take a brief amount of time to see what question is alive for that circle at this moment, and sort of keep that in your mind as you go about doing the work of your circle. I think that's a really interesting way to approach our work together, but I'm not sure anyone's doing it anymore. And then you go into whatever the work is of your particular circle. So that's the idea of shared stewardship. The idea was to spread power also kind of horizontally through the Sangha so that we're empowering our members to help run the Zen Center. And because, as some of you know, we do have hierarchy in our tradition. I am the abbot. And we do have hierarchy in terms of how people receive transmission and how they become leaders and teachers in our tradition. Even though we are very secular in our style, we still have hierarchy. And that hierarchy, if all the power in the organization is oriented around that vertical hierarchy with the teacher at the top, whoever the head teacher is, it leads to corruption, it leads to problems, and it has. We've seen it happen in the Western Zen tradition in other Zen centers. So the idea of shared stewardship is we mitigate some of that by spreading the responsibility for how the Zen Center functions throughout in a horizontal way as well, just to balance the vertical. I'm going to stop there and see, anyone have any questions about this before I go on into more of the spiritual vision that supports this? Any questions about the mechanics, how we're doing circles? Okay.
Roshi, I had a question.
Yeah, hi, Carlene.
I love this idea of the guiding question. Would you be able to give an example of what a guiding question, what would that be like?
Well, let's find the guiding question right now. Silence. What would be a guiding question for us right here today? What would be a question worth contemplating? And there's no right or wrong answer. Robin?
How can we build a strong Sangha?
How can we build a strong Sangha? Okay. And we don't have to answer any of these questions, and we don't have to comment on them. It's like visioning. Anyone else? How do we build a strong Sangha? Anyone?
How can we all be included?
How can we all be included? Anybody? How can we slow down enough to actually care for each other?
How can we slow down enough to care for ourselves?
How can we slow down enough to care for ourselves? Sensei is reminding me. That seems to me like a pretty good guiding question. How can we take the time that's necessary to nurture and build strong relationships in our community? You don't build a relationship by just sending someone an email, do you? And yet we kind of settle for that now in our world.
So Roshi,
Yeah.
good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning, Sangha and Sensei. Is this specifically a question in the open heart circle? We always start with a Dharma gem that in some way it's a Dharma gem, like a statement, it's a statement been made, and we just consider that, and it's a statement that has to do with the circle. So it doesn't really end in a question mark, but it's contemplative, and we just let it resonate before we start the circle. Is that acceptable in terms of this?
You could do this different ways. You could do it by reading a poem. You could do it by reading something from the Dharma. In this case, I'm suggesting you actually do it by finding a guiding question.
Okay.
I think you have to work a little bit to find the guiding question.
Mm-hmm.
You have to actually reflect a little bit. What are we here to do together? And what is it that seems important about what we're doing and how we would do it? So for me, and there's no right or wrong answer, what comes to mind to me for my talk here this morning is how can we take the time to actually steward our Sangha, steward each other, be together in a way that's caring and loving and supportive. And I do think, and this is going to lead me right into the next topic, many of us are concerned about the environment. Many of us know, I'm sure you all know, that we are out of balance on the planet Earth. And it's seems to be a big problem. And we see seemingly the results of that everywhere. Heat, fires, floods, storms, dying species, dying forests, dying oceans. And when we think about that, and when you hear about that, and you hear the statistics, I think the way we usually respond to that is through our notion of what I would call linear time. We live in a scientific secular culture which basically accepts this notion of linear time. And so and linear time is how you measure and you draw trends, and you can say that, in 20 years, the average temperature is going to raise by 2 degrees, and and you can predict the outcome of that. And we hear this all the time. So if we're actually looking at the science, it'd be like the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has a report out. It says we have 2 decades to reduce our carbon footprints to the level that will avoid a 2% rise in the average global temperatures. That's looking at this in terms of linear time. Kyoto Protocol has the same kind of commitment periods that are drawn out. And they set deadlines for meeting those commitments. When we think of the global crisis this way, the first thing that is happening in our heads is the clock is ticking, right? The clock is ticking. And when the clock is ticking, you don't have much time. So then you frame this as a crisis. And when we frame anything as a crisis, the way we react to that crisis is we don't have much time, let's grab for whatever we know may work, whatever technological fix might work, and let's try that. Let's get off all oil and gas and use renewables, and maybe we'll have to use nuclear power. That's all right. It's better than gas and oil. So we have to make decisions. The problem with this is this doesn't take into consideration the people that may be the poorer communities that may actually be impacted by the linear kind of decisions we make. And we're dealing with a planet, Mother Earth, which is a complex, interdependent ecosystem. And you cannot address this with linear solutions. They're not going to work. You have to have some kind of systems thinking to address a complex system like Gaia, like Mother Earth. So there is, I first heard of this from Evan Thompson a couple years ago. And he made a distinction between linear time and kinship time. And there is a Native American professor at the University of Michigan, Kyle White, who has written quite a bit about kinship time. Kinship time, as opposed to linear time, reveals how today's climate change risks are already caused by people's not taking responsibility for one another's safety, well-being, and self-determination. Any solutions to climate change will be enacted within a state of affairs that are already rife with irresponsibility. Kinship, as an ethic of shared responsibility, focuses attention on how responsible relationships must first be established or restored for it to be possible to have renewable energy projects that respond to our safety, our well-being, and our self-determination. Yeah. Kinship time, as opposed to linear time, reveals how today's climate change is caused by people's not taking responsibility for each other's safety, well-being, and self-determination. Any solutions to climate change will be enacted within a state of affairs that is already a status quo, that is already full of irresponsibility. Kinship, as an ethic of shared responsibility, focuses attention on how responsible relationships must first be established or restored for it to be possible to have renewable energy projects that respond and help support our mutual safety, well-being, and self-determination. In the workplace, where many of you live day in and day out, when kinship relationships are absent, and the norm is clock time, linear time, we're all familiar with it, then change can feel like a whole world is crashing down upon you. Without good hearts and good faith, employees can feel crushed by performance expectations, new policies and software systems, and impersonal conflicts and turf wars. A bad performance review in this context is experienced through time, and it can feel like an abrupt shock where the employee feels like no one has their back. There is no mutual responsibility taking place in that context. Do you get this? The lack, we talk about it all the time, the lack of workplace, what's the word we use for it? The lack of job security. Loyalty. Yeah. Mutual responsibility. And the trauma that linear time is creating in our culture is severe. I would suggest that it is creating a huge amount of our trauma and suffering right now. And we don't see. And so if you're caught in that model of linear time, there is no time to think about how could we possibly take the time to build relationships to deal with the climate crisis. That just seems so, in terms of linear time, that's just not even it's not even in the equation. And yet, environmental activists with the best of intentions, if you're saying the only way to solve the climate crisis, we're going to have to use more nuclear energy, where is that uranium going to be mined? Where are the uranium mines? You know where they are? They're mostly on federal and tribal lands. So that linear solution doesn't take into account that poorer people are going to be sacrificed in order to achieve that outcome. It doesn't even consider that. And that's why I think it's impossible to talk about the environmental crisis without also addressing the social justice in our culture. And we have a huge shadow. In America, I think Canada has it too. When you start to look at the history of how we have treated Native Americans, it is heartbreaking, it is ugly, it is shameful. And one of the questions I kept asking during my retreat with Julie and Sensei and others, when I heard stories of how settlers and white people we had policies that basically committed genocide on Native Americans and still do. But we also were mean. And there's still a lot of meanness directed towards people of color. And I just wonder why. Why do we have this fear of Native Americans? And the only answer I can come up with, and I don't know if this is I don't know if this is accurate, but the only answer I can come up with is at some unconscious level, we know that they had a spiritual and a culture that was whole and spiritual and lived in relative harmony with the planet. And knowing that, and knowing how we are actually living and the the incongruity of those two is too great for us to actually hold together. So we split that off, and we basically split that off. And in creating that kind of shadow, we end up actually hating ourselves. And what I see today in my country is a lot of self-hate. Hate directed at others, for sure, but also a kind of self-hate. The level of gun violence in America is off the charts. And you have to wonder why. Why are we so invested in this violence if that isn't some kind of expression of self-hate? And so I feel at a very deep spiritual level, and it holds true personally and collectively. We all have personal shadows psychologically, and part of our work as Zen practitioners on any spiritual path is you have to own your own shadow to be whole. To be a trusted human being, you have to own your shadow. If you know someone that hasn't dealt with their shadow, they're not trustworthy. So I'll give you an example which I've often told before about my own, when I started realizing I had a shadow. I was caretaking a property in southern Colorado for Trungpa Rinpoche, and I was way off in the sticks taking care of people on 2-month, 3-month retreats, and I was in this little cabin in the mountains all by myself. And I had this dream one night, and up on the top of this hill was a silhouette with a gun, and I couldn't see who it was. I just saw the silhouette. It was male. And it was really scary. And I woke up from my dream, and I immediately thought, someone's coming to kill me. I went and I locked the doors of my cabin as best I could. I couldn't go back to sleep for the rest of the night. I was waiting for someone to come kill me. And I had the same dream over and over again over the years. And each time it was terrifying to me. Who is that? And eventually, because I was trying to figure this out, I realized who it was. And of course, who was it? Of course, who was it? Yours truly. Me. It was me. And then once I saw it was me, the dream went, I didn't have the dream again. And I think that's kind of how, that's just an example. We all have to deal with that which we disown in ourselves, but we also have to do it at a collective level. And that's, that seems impossible. But there it is. We do have a shadow as a country, too. The way we treated Japanese Americans during World War II, just shameful, absolutely shameful, the way we treated them. Slavery, the way we took Native Americans and put them in government schools. Now, I read a story about this. It was just heartbreaking. Native Americans don't cut their hair. Their hair is really important. And someone was telling a story about that during the retreat. And I was feeling kind of bad when I heard that story. Because, well. And they all have hair, And then I read this story about when they created government schools. They did it in Canada too, I believe. And the idea was they were going to assimilate the savages. They were going to make them Christians, essentially. They needed to Christianize them so that, kill the Indian and save the human was a kind of a slogan. So they took these kids away from their families, put them in government schools, made them take away all their cultural clothing, make them wear uniforms like a Catholic school, and cut their hair. And the only time that Native Americans cut their hair is when someone dies. And so these little kids were in the school, And when their hair got cut, they thought someone died. And some of those kids tried to escape the school to go home to go to the funeral. Some of them died, some of their legs, they got frostbite, they froze, they lost their legs. And so we have done our best to destroy the kinship system, the beautiful, beautiful kinship, complex, family extended Teoshpaye that the Native Americans had at one time. And now the result that we see on the reservations is a lot of dysfunction, high rates of addiction, alcohol, very high rates of suicide. There's more than 80% unemployment on Pine Ridge Reservation. It's the poorest county in America. They don't own their own land, even on the reservation. And they have about 4 agencies that regulate the reservation. They're the most regulated people in America. So, I want to say one last thing about this kinship time. I think mentoring is very much about kinship time, and we are a mentoring tradition. In our Zen tradition, we mentor, students are mentored by teachers. I have been very fortunate. I have had many good Zen teachers, Tibetan Vajrayana teachers that were mentors to me as I grew up. And you understand that a mentoring relationship is not in the family. Your father and mother really don't make very good mentors because they usually have some expectation about who you're going to be. Bob, you're going to be a lawyer, aren't you? Oh, okay. You're going to be a doctor? What if I be an artist? Oh, God, really? You don't want to do that. You'll never make a living. So your father and your mother don't make very good mentors because they have some expectation about the outcome. As much as they can love you, they're not very good mentors. And so a mentor is someone that sees you. And it's so important to be seen this way, just to be seen as who you are, and to loved as you are, and then to be nurtured as you are. That is so beautiful, that relationship. And that doesn't exist in a family. That's a kind of kinship. That's what I mean by kinship time. And that doesn't happen by email. It doesn't happen in a week. It happens in months and years of regular, face-to-face, deep, intimate conversations about things that are important, about our fears, about our vulnerabilities, and that builds that relationship. And that's what I mean by kinship time. And I think that that's the kind of what we mean by Sangha is this kind of warm, genuine community where we care for each other. And I think that is a huge resource and is maybe really the definition of wealth. We say time is money. Oh my God, that is so delusional. We spend all our time to make money that doesn't mean anything, and sacrifice the planet so that we can make money. Our real wealth is the planet, but we sacrifice that. We work hard to make money, and then we ruin our own health, and then we have to make more money to, we're just upside down all the way. So the last thing I'll close with, and then we could have some discussion, is I really think that a lot of the reactions we have about the climate when we react in terms of a kind of crisis epistemology is that it creates certainty for us. You grab for a solution, you say, this is going to solve the problem. And I think the other way to work with this is to actually open to the uncertainty that our lives are full of uncertainty and not knowing. And to be able to be, I think actually there's a real kind of hope that we can have when we are willing to be with uncertainty and not knowing. And that's a kind of wise hope. We're not hoping for an end, an outcome, but we're hoping right now that we can be here with some kind of integrity, and that we can take care of each other, and that we can love this world no matter how messed up it is. We could just love this world because we are lovable, and this world is something so beautiful. So I'll end on that, and we can have a little discussion. Anyone, any
Hey,
questions?
Roshi,
Yeah, Patrick.
really loved your talk. There was just so much to it. I think with the global warming thing, I've realized it is so polarized and political. It seems not just in this country, but it's so worldwide. And we are in a mining community here. And this mining community, it's been devastated by COVID. But the fear of going green, it's understandable why they are so polarized about it. Because everything is looked at, like you were saying, we're looking for a solution, an extreme solution to take care of everything. And they feel that the only people who are going to look out for them are a political party. And it just breeds more insanity. While these things are being politicized, it's I don't see it as I don't see there being a solution when the two political parties are so polarized and so opposed to looking at the other person's perspective. On a human level, it's beautiful. I've had my eyes opened and seen people and understand what they're going through, and I can really relate in a way that I didn't before. But once you get into beyond the individual and into the groups, then you start creating a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, we are divided.
Hi, Roshi. Thank you so much for such a provocative teaching. And, I've listened to many talks, since being part of the Sangha. And usually I have this thing of like, yeah, that would be nice if I could do something, but I really can't. Like this little idea in my head that what's being shared or taught is happening over there. It's an over there thing. It's another something over there. And if I just, do my own thing in my own little corner and just don't mess up my little square, then when the rest of the universe gets to my square, the goodness of my square will just meld in. Like, just stand and pivot a little bit, but really don't move. Like, thank you for sharing that. But today, I feel like I'm being moved inside in a way where that statement inside me is just not holding up anymore. And that doesn't mean I know what to do with it, but I'm feeling a shift just listening. Because I notice when I watch on the news and they say the fires that are breaking out everywhere, these fires.
Yeah.
I'm feeling the heat inside me. I'm feeling tears. I'm feeling like I'm feeling an extension of like a water bucket or hose should become something. I'm feeling moved. And I just wanted to say that out loud because I think my inaction, I've just been making excuses for that. And I just feel like there's a shift happening where, what's true is finally catching up with me, and I'm beginning to see that, you know, my house is burning down, my backyard is burning down. And I think that's the difference, to not be focused on, oh, it's happening over there.
Yes, again, when the clock is ticking, it's really easy to feel disempowered and overwhelmed, because what can you do? But if you approach this as kinship time, that this is maybe the work that we have to do is to build relationships and communities back at a local level, and work with environmental problems more in our local community. Then maybe that's something that's actually workable, that we can all do to some degree. We can talk to our neighbor, we can build relationships. Well, you know, I want to show you how we actually practice kinship time here at the Zen Center, because I want to demonstrate how we do that here. So we're going to do that right now. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Linda.
Linda,
Happy birthday to you. Woo! Speech,
Hi,
speech.
Linda.
Happy birthday.
Oh, you want to do it again? You can do it again, Earl. We can do it again. You're supposed to be out of tune? Okay, let's do it out of tune. Let's do it again out of tune.
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Linda. Happy birthday to you.
Birthday to
Good call, Earl. Good.
Speech.
See, this is why you may want to come to Sunday morning Zen in person, because we're serving cake and ice cream today. This is what kinship time looks like.
Roshi, thanks for a great talk this morning. Lots to think about. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Uh,
78. 78. 2 more years.
and then she can eat whatever she wants. Amy, where do you come from? Are you in the area?
I live in Riverside.
Riverside, not too far. And what do you do for a living?
I'm a high school principal.
You're a high school principal. Which high school?
Trinity High School.
Oh, good for you. Huh? So how is it for you?
Private school. Second year of the pandemic, we had about 30% of our students at home, and we're doing this.
Yeah.
And then last year was strictly for in-person learning, so it's been really difficult. But
Is it hard to get people to come back?
it was hard to get people to come back first.
Uh,
And, you know,
No.
that's controversy about every discipline.
Yeah. Yeah. But now you're doing in-person classes pretty much?
Last year too, we did only in-person classes.
No hybrid?
No hybrid last year.
Yeah.
It's a very small school, and you know, this is taxing, and the folks in the room, and the folks at home, and the teachers wearing masks, and everybody had microphones. It was
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
Hopefully this year,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are they wearing masks in school?
as of last February, it was a mask optional. I would say at the end of last year, maybe about 50% of the students were choosing to wear masks, and we don't know what's going to happen.
I mean, I've read studies that say mental health for kids has declined during the pandemic. That isolation has been really impactful.
Yes, I also have 2 teenage daughters, so I can tell you as like a professional and as a mom, it's been really rough on the team.
Yeah.
So I think what you're talking about when you're being so isolated, I think that's really gotten to the wayside.
Yeah, my grandson was graduated last year from high school, and he feels like he lost all of his feelings.
So many of those seminal events, the proms, the graduation, the sports banquet.
I think it's been across the board. It feels like we've lost.
Not like, you know,
We've been trying really hard to try and recreate that sense of community.